We have done this video to assist you, the dealer, and your clock setup person with the recommended procedures for setting up Ethan Allen clocks. We have also included troubleshooting for minor problems which could be encountered during normal delivery and setup. The floor clocks should be opened and checked for loose parts and concealed damage prior to delivery to the customer. The clock should be transported to the consumer's location in its original carton with all packing materials left intact. 2 people should always be used for delivery and setup. The floor clock should be carried to its setup point by using the handholds provided in the carton. Lay the carton on its side and carefully open the carton by cutting along the taped edge. Notice that the parts needed for assembly of the clock are located at the head and foot of the carton. As you remove the packing material, carefully check for loose parts. Take all loose parts out and lay to one side. Carefully lift the clock out of the carton and lower the base end to the floor. Now pull the plastic bag up over the base for easy removal when the clock is set up. At this point, make sure that the levelers turn freely so that they may be easily adjusted when the clock is in the upright position. Now carefully remove the pendulum by cutting along the taped edge and place with the other loose parts. Next, remove the packing collar by carefully cutting the tape that secures them to the clock. Care should be taken that you do not cut through the bag and damage the surface of the clock. Carefully cut the remaining tape strips so that the plastic bag can be easily removed. Remove the plastic bag by slipping the bag up and over the clock. Do not attempt to cut the plastic bag off the clock. It should be removed from the clock as shown. Remove the presentation box from the filler box in which it is located. If the clock has a finial, it should be put into its proper location at this time. Carefully cut the wrapping material away from the presentation box. Take care not to cut into the box. Inside the presentation box, you will find a warranty card and an owner's manual for the clock. Each of the procedures that are shown in this video are explained in detail in the owner's manual and should be referred to frequently. You should emphasize to the owner that they need to completely familiarize themselves with this manual. The presentation box also contains a pair of white gloves, a level for leveling the clock, the crank for winding the clock, and a brass key which should be placed into the lock. Using 2 people, carefully set the clock in its permanent location. Remove the side grills by lifting up, tilting the bottom end, turn the grill to an angle and lift out. Remove the microfoam and discard. The first step to level a clock is to place the level inside the cabinet on the clock workspace. Adjust the levelers if needed. The next step is to place the level on the bottom front rail and adjust the levelers as needed again. The instruction sheet for the removal of the internal packing material is located with the inspection tag. Remove the packing from the chime hammers by carefully cutting the rubber band. Remove the foam packing from the chime hammers and discard. Remove the packing from the chime bars by gently pushing the foam down. Now check and make sure none of the chime bars are touching each other. The next procedure is to check the adjustment of the chime hammers on the chime rod. Each hammer should rest approximately 1/8 inch from the chime rod. Check to make sure each hammer hits the chime rod squarely. If it does not, bend the stem of the hammer gently until it is in the correct position. This is a dead hit. This is a metal-to-metal sound. The number 1 and number 8 hammers of this clock need to be adjusted. To make this adjustment, use your forefinger and your thumb to gently bend the stem of the hammer. Do not overbend the hammer by using excessive force. The number 1 and the number 8 hammers have now been adjusted. This is the correct sound for this clock. Release one end of the rubber band from the base of the clock and free the other end from the weight wheels. If the weight wheels come off their cables, they can easily be set back in place. Now open the pendulum carton. Do not remove the pendulum at this time. Open the styrofoam box that contains the weights. You now need to put the nylon gloves on to prevent tarnishing the pendulum and the weights. Remove the plastic film from the pendulum and insert the pendulum into the clock. Use your left hand to stabilize the pendulum leader and hang the pendulum from the leader. Carefully unwrap the brass tubes that contain the weights. Each weight is labeled for their correct position on the clock. The L weight indicates it's for the left side of the clock. The C indicates that this weight is for the center of the clock. It is very important that these weights be put in the proper location. If not, the clock will either not run or not run properly. The R on this weight indicates that it goes on the right-hand side of the clock. The next step is to set the time on the clock. To do this, turn the minute hand counterclockwise until it corresponds to the present time. Care must be taken not to accidentally move the hour hand. At this time, set the pendulum in motion to start the clock. As evidenced by the movement of the second hand, the clock is now running. To set the moving moon, place your hand behind the face of the clock and rotate the moving moon gently. To synchronize the moving moon dial, you will need to follow the directions as outlined on page 12 of the owner's manual. Replace the gloves, the owner's manual, the warranty card, and the level to the presentation box. Place the box in the base of the clock. The crank is stored behind the crown at the top of the clock. Now replace your side grills, close the door, and lock. We are now going to address some common problems that will prevent the clock from running. In this situation, the pendulum is swinging but the second hand is not moving. The cause of this is the second hand binding against the face of the clock. To correct, grasp the second hand and gently pull out. The shaft of this second hand is a friction fit. In the event that it falls out during transit, the second hand can be easily reinserted. In this situation, the minute hand is binding against the hour hand. As you will notice, both hands are moving together. This will eventually cause the clock to stop. The clock has now stopped. To correct this, gently pry out the minute hand and restart the clock. In this situation, the moving moon dial retainer clip has been jarred out of place. Simply bend back and snap into position. The clock's chimes automatically adjust themselves to the proper time after a 1-hour period, but we will show you how to set the time when the hour strike does not correspond with the time shown on the face of the clock. For instance, you will notice that the hour strike was for 3 o'clock when the time showing on the face of the clock was for 2 o'clock. To make this adjustment, first stop the clock. Then gently move the hour hand to the 3 o'clock position. It is important that you do not move the minute hand to make this adjustment. Now move the minute hand to set the clock to the right time and restart the clock. To regulate the speed of the clock, use the adjusting nut at the base of the pendulum. To speed up the clock, turn the nut to the right. To slow down the clock, turn the adjusting nut to the left. We are now going to replace a broken suspension spring. First, stop the clock. Remove the pendulum and remove the pendulum leader. Remove the retainer screw and remove the broken suspension spring. To replace, insert the new suspension spring and replace the retainer screw. Do not over-tighten. The suspension spring must move freely. Replace the pendulum leader and the pendulum and restart the clock. The wall-mounted key-wind clocks should be uncartoned on a flat surface. When the packing materials are removed, the presentation box, the box containing the weights, and the pendulum should be taken out and placed to one side. The clock should be lifted from the box and the microfoam removed. The interior packing materials are removed in the same manner as the floor clocks. The chime hammers and rods on the right-facing side should be checked for proper adjustment at this time. The left-facing chimes, the hour chimes, should not become misaligned during transit. If the chime hammers or rods need adjustment, the clock must be turned over on the face. The screws holding the clock assembly to the case must be removed and the clock turned back over. Carefully lift off the case to gain access to the chime hammers and rods. The chime hammers are adjusted by gentle bending with needle-nosed pliers, and the chime rods are carefully bent back into proper alignment. The case is repositioned on the clock assembly. The clock is turned back onto its face and the clock assembly is re-secured. To set up the key-wind mantel clocks, the back access door should be opened and the instructions and the warranty should be removed. The foam packing underneath the chime hammers should be removed slowly to check the alignment of the hammers and chime rods. The second and third chime hammers have sounded dead hits, caused by the chime rods being in contact with each other. To correct this, the chime rods can be bent apart with slight pressure from the thumb and forefinger. Another problem that can occur with both floor and mantel clocks is that of the minute hand being 2 to 3 minutes behind or ahead of the hour at the time of the hour strike. To adjust the minute hand, unscrew the cap nut from the end of the hand shaft and remove the minute hand. The minute hand has a friction-fit ferrule that can be turned with a number 0 sized square-bitted driver. Only make slight adjustments to the ferrule to compensate for the difference in time. The minute hand can then be repositioned and secured in place with the cap nut. To set up the 25-inch wall clocks, some disassembly is required to remove the internal packing material. The clock should first be turned onto its face. Then the plastic clips around the frame should be loosened and turned to the side to remove the back panel. The hardware bag contains the additional screws needed to secure the clock to the frame. Remove the 3 screws that attach the dial panel to the frame. Carefully lift the clock from the frame and turn it dial side up. Remove the microfoam that is taped over the minute hand. The second and third pieces of microfoam are slid along one side and can be removed by sliding them under the hands of the clock. Due to the weight of the hands, this microfoam protection is necessary to prevent the hands from scratching the glass or the dial face during shipping. The clock should now be turned on its edge and the hands rotated to make certain they turn freely. In this case, the hour and minute hand are binding against each other. This can easily be corrected by gently bending the hour hand. It is recommended that the hands are turned 1 full revolution before assembly. The clock should be placed back in the frame with the pencil mark on the back of the dial panel lined up in the seam of the bent plywood. The hardware bag containing the additional screws should be opened and the clock reattached to the frame. The back should be placed on the frame and the plastic clips repositioned and tightened. The batteries are installed and the clock is running as evidenced by the movement of the second hand. To straighten the second hand of this battery-operated clock, the bezel must be removed. To correctly remove the bezel, the clock is turned onto its face and the access door opened. The glass bezel is held onto the face by 3 plastic pins and plug fasteners. To release the pins from the plug fasteners, push forward on the pins with needle-nosed pliers. Remove the fasteners from the clock and place them to one side. Then return the clock to the upright position. Carefully remove the glass bezel and gently bend the second hand back into position. Replace the bezel and turn the clock back onto its face. Grip the plug fasteners with the pliers and place onto the plastic pins. With the pliers slightly spread apart, push the fasteners down onto the pins. We at Ethan Allen hope this video will assist you in having successful clock setups.